Bueno, pues buenos días, buenas.
Good morning and good afternoon, dear friends. Welcome, everyone. We are here opening up pathways and building bridges among countries and cultures, thanks to the tools that we have through information technology. And to be able to use them in all areas, we need good connectivity. And we are here in a virtual event to launch a study, a very important document that is a watershed document in a very difficult time as we're going through in the world crisis through the COVID-19 pandemic. The document you will be hearing about has happened thanks to a public-private partnership with an international organization, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, IICA, a landmark for everyone in the world with 34 member countries. And it has helped join the largest development bank, the IADB, in the world, and a company that helps us every day in our activities, Microsoft. So in this boat together, there's a captain, an Argentinian called Manuel Otero. I also have to say that this event is being broadcast through the social media of AICA, Charrúa CB in Uruguay, Brazilian channels, Latin American channel of Agrotendencia, and the YouTube channel and webpage of FEAGRO, feagro.com, a specialized informational agency for agricultural communication that I lead. And because you have not connected to hear me, Pedro Damian Diego, but actually for something much more important, we will now start with our event with the Ecuadorian group LAC with the song Zapateando Yuyayay, a song composed as part of the contribution from this group to the homage that AICA paid to workers in the food chain, a wonderful initiative by the Institute that brought together several groups of artists and musicians from the Americas. So with that, we open with a song.
Ecuatorianos por el mundo festejando tradiciones lindas del Ecuador. Hola amigos.
Hello friends, I am Jaime Diaz from the LAC group in Ecuador. I wish to send a warm embrace to all of you that work at AICA and that are part of it. The Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, thank you on behalf of all the countries of the Americas that receive technical assistance from AICA in agriculture. Thanks to that help, we have more productive crops and better yields to share food with the rest of the world. So a warm embrace to all.
Año tras año, agricultores y trabajadores de la cadena alimenticia de las Américas trabajando para tener al mundo alimentando. Bajando por el cerro Cuyayay, ha llegado el Inti Raimi Cuyayay. Bajando por el cerro Cuyayay, ha llegado el Inti Raimi Cuyayay. Zapateando duro, duro Cuyayay, vamos a tomar la plaza Cuyayay. Zapateando duro, duro Cuyayay. Vamos a tomar la plaza Cuyayay. Zapateando, zapateando por aquí. Zapateando, zapateando por allá. Zapateando, zapateando por aquí. Zapateando, zapateando por allá. En el trópico, valles y montañas, hombres y mujeres, valientes sembrando y cosechando vida en esta bendita tierra. guitarras, uy, ay, ay, que te de las risas, uy, ay, ay, afinen en galito, guambras, uy, ay, ay, que lloren las guitarras, uy, ay, ay, afinen en galito, guambras, uy, ay, ay, que lloren las guitarras, uy, ay, ay, zapateando, zapateando por aquí, zapateando, zapateando por allá, zapateando, zapateando por aquí, zapateando, zapateando por allá. Trucos milenarios, dulces, salados, leche fresca, van llegando.
Bueno, parece que
So we have the song now, and I have the pleasure of asking Director General of AICA, Commander Manuel Otero, to give us his opening words. Thank you very much. I don't know if I'm a commander or marine or captain, but in any case, well, commander, captain, marine, just a humble servant that's trying to lead an institution at the service of all countries. Well, it's a big ship, and you've managed to have great public partnerships, so public partnerships. So that's not easily done. Thank you. Yes, I guess I have to say a few words, especially first, good morning, good afternoon to those joining us from South America, Europe, and other areas. Very warm greetings to our partners who trusted us, the IDB, Microsoft, FIDA, the ministers of the governments of Argentina, my country. I thank you very much, Minister Basterra. I know you have to leave us soon, given your multiple commitments. Madam Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Vice Ministers, my friend Fernando Schwanke, Vice Minister of Colombia, also a friend of mine, the representative of Anatel, the Brazilian regulator, and of course, all AICA members and officers, actually, with Jorge Huerta, Joaquin Arias, Federico Villarreal, all of you, thank you so much for your support in this and other initiatives. Greetings to those joining us through the social media as well, all the professionals working in the press in the Americas. I once worked as a journalist, and I truly believe that technical cooperation has to give more importance to communication-related matters. If not, society won't know about what we are doing. Another points, I have to thank you also because you're the main stakeholders to reduce the gaps we may have in connectivity and accelerate it in rural territories. Welcome, everyone. The pandemic has made this topic of rural connectivity an essential matter. We cannot forget about it now. It was before coronavirus and now even more so. And so I have to be clear and compelling. There is no possible transformation for agriculture based on sustainability, competitiveness, and social inclusion if we do not progress in closing these gaps, in building bridges between urban and rural environments. We know everything that we can do with the internet. We know that we can work and study, sell, buy, learn, collect information, socialize, have fun, even look at our children and grandchildren that are far. And I say this very especially because I have two daughters in Argentina, a son in Singapore, and grandchildren far away from me. And so this really touches my heart. So I'm convinced that international organizations, government bodies, and the private sector all must come together. These are times for inter-cooperation. We must work together to create a large coalition that can promote and extend connectivity to our rural areas, especially the most remote areas in Latin America and the Caribbean. I wish to congratulate the authors of this very profound work, Ms. Alessandra, and all the institutions that have supported it, at AICA and others, because it gives us a full idea, a good overview of rural connectivity and urban connectivity, the differences we have between them, and showing how much we can help contribute to better the lives of our fellow citizens with broadband and more connectivity. I feel truly proud of this work that we humbly supported from AICA with Microsoft and FIDA. And hopefully it can help foster more and better policies and investment decisions to favor rural populations and urban populations alike. We all win if we invest to create and multiply social capital for our rural areas. Promoting connectivity, as the study says, is essential, and it's a priority to develop all productive life, as well as social and community life in rural areas. It also means we have to bring rural territories to stand up as areas for progress, hope, creating jobs, and stopping this perverse, vicious cycle where insecurity, poverty, and immigration feed back on each other. I don't think I have to get into all the details of how important this agenda is at a time where the recession brought about by the pandemic has hit us all. It is the largest recorded in all Latin America and the Caribbean, and there's greater numbers going under lines of people going under the lines of poverty and living in insecurity. If we talk about connectivity, it's about the possibility of turning the page for the process of modernizing agriculture to ensure access of producers to commercial chains and helping find new generations work in agriculture. It's empowering young women and people in rural areas to foster bioeconomy, disseminate language, knowledge, and strategic areas, improving crop yields, and overall having better income and better quality of life for people in our countryside. Because we don't just want to talk, we want to act. Here at our headquarters, we are also connecting with different partners like Ministries of Communication and Technology in Costa Rica. We've built the first Fab Lab for agriculture, a space that will bring technological solutions for family agriculture in Costa Rica and the whole hemisphere. In an alliance with Microsoft and Bayer, and that's why I'm very glad to have Luciano Braverman with us, we have launched the Center for Interpreting Agriculture Tomorrow. It is a space for education, for experimenting and interacting with artificial intelligence on agriculture that will not just be visited in presence after the pandemic, but it will also be available online. We also have a partnership with the Organization for Precision Agriculture, PAD, founded by the Nobel Prize winner of economy in 2019, Michael Kremer, where we can sow the seeds in Latin America and the Caribbean of all that has already been done in Asia and Africa for family agriculture through precision agriculture and new digital services for outreach and technical assistance. Before concluding, I insist on the need to promote digital inclusion in the countryside so that the weakest links in our rural areas can have better yields, more income, reduce poverty, and ensure social inclusion and sustainable rural development. Connectivity in rural areas means that we have to work against certain rooted cultural traditions, and we have to bring all these services to universalize them everywhere. With this challenge, AICA is ready and committed to work alongside the countries in their service. Thank you very much. Thank you, Manuel. It truly is a great opportunity to have this study. So thank you to the ADB and Microsoft for making it possible as well. And now we have words by the Minister of Health, of Information and Communication Technologies, Entertainment, Entrepreneurship, and Talent Development. Sorry, one thing before that, I apologize. Before that, we have the Minister of Argentina, Minister of Agriculture, Luis Basterra, who's joining us, and he has asked me, because he does not have much time in his agenda, if it were at all possible, if you agree, we can offer him the floor so that he may leave. It's a very special request. So if I apologize if we can give the floor to him. So Mr. Minister of Argentina, Luis Basterra. Good afternoon, good morning. I'm sorry, I apologize. I thought that 10 a.m. was 10 a.m. My time and it was Costa Rica time, so I got confused. I apologize. I'm sorry to have made you change the order. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of the event, AICA, and also those who from the private sector have also participated to make this a better world. There's no doubt that for us, education and access to knowledge is the new role of social justice. And rurality is very important for us. As we heard Manuel say, connectivity is the opportunity of being part of a new world, of accessing technologies that facilitate greater competitiveness, that help reduce efforts that might even be detrimental to the health of farmers when they have to perform tasks that are very harsh and could be helped with technological advances. Therefore, from Argentina, we are fully committed to developing the digital network, providing access to rural areas. Through the enterprise ARSAT, we have already placed several kilometers of fiber optic, and the interaction between different organizations of the state, agencies, and international organisms, all of them have worked to improve connectivity because we see it as an element for social equality. And besides that, we also want to have territorial equality. There is a series of activities that become feasible thanks to the opportunities created by being part of a network. Many of these are left outside if you do not participate in the same network. There have been important developments, value added throughout territories because we have these points of contact in certain agro industries. That certainly helps promote a complete rurality, not just in the primary production area, but also in processing raw materials in the same places where raw materials are produced. So we can define policies that are included in these concepts of social and territorial equality. And of course, the importance that connectivity has for companies to grow in scale. Many of these, with their own investments, can now access other areas thanks to greater connectivity. The idea is for this connectivity to be easily accessible, to be universal, especially emphasizing on family agriculture. Remembering that for family agriculture, the profitability, so to speak, of this type of enterprise is not measured only with capital retribution, but also quality of life of their members, young people, men and women that work in this area. If they are connected, they can aspire to continue living in rural areas. If you see this is not happening, it leads to greater migration from the countryside to our cities. And there you have these mega cities that have been created with all the problems we've seen now in the pandemic. So going back to social organizations that have a more human scale in the place where you can contribute to society is one of our main goals And this is done through connectivity. It is absolutely a priority for anyone in my country. Thank you very much for your invitation and much success. Thank you, Minister. It is a good snapshot of the importance of connectivity to ensure populations remain in rural areas, looking into the future. Young people, I'm sure that all of Argentina will be thankful for that. And now we can go with the Minister of Health, Information Technology, Entertainment, Entrepreneurship, and Talent Development of St. Kitts and Nevis, Ms. Aquila Byron Nesbitt. Good
Thank
afternoon,
you.
Minister.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you as well, and good afternoon to everyone participating, wherever you are in the world. I'm sure I should say good morning as well to those persons participating in some areas where it's still morning. I am indeed honored to have been invited by Director General Otero of the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture to deliver remarks at the launch of this study on rural connectivity in Latin America and the Caribbean, a bridge to sustainable development during a pandemic. It is my privilege and pleasure on behalf of the government and people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis to bring you greetings on the occasion of this very important event that will share the findings on the status of rural connectivity in our region. The timing of this study and this event is very significant, considering the unprecedented challenges that countries the world over have been confronted with as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. To contain the spread of COVID-19, countries were forced to institute measures, including stay-at-home orders, total lockdowns, and border closings, just to name a few. The COVID-19 pandemic have also triggered all of our economies to fast-track e-commerce and our digitalization plans. And the hard truth is that businesses and jurisdictions that fail to adapt quickly will suffer severe economic hardship. Latin America and the Caribbean has a small window of opportunity to quickly deploy digitalization strategies to remain relevant to foreign inward investment, increase our access to markets, especially for our local producers and farmers, and create a niche for ourselves as one of the top places to work remotely or even set up new businesses. In St. Kitts and Nevis in particular, we have seen an increase in the number of new tech businesses, from website developers to mobile application developers, and even mobile payment solutions, which offer payment options and services to small businesses and to farmers as well. In 2019, our government would have launched or embarked on our strategic path to accelerate towards an innovative digital economy through the implementation of a digital transformation strategy. It is our vision that St. Kitts and Nevis can become one of the world leaders in digital services delivery to our citizens, our residents, our private sector, and even the investors in a manner that is safe, efficient, interactive, and responsive to the needs of end users, and one which would allow for economic growth and contribute to national development. Our approach is simple, and it is very important, and that is we want to ensure that the foundational elements that are implemented from the outset. And it is for this reason we are, as a government, developing our whole of government technology strategy as well as cybersecurity strategy as our first steps in our digital transformation. As we speak specifically to rural connectivity, one of our aims in our transformation at the structural level is to strengthen our government-wide area network and ensure broadband connectivity across the whole of government. Equally, through public-private partnership with local internet service providers, our aim is to be able to deliver fiber to the home, as well as boost the Wi-Fi hotspots within communities in a way that is robust and that will deliver high quality at affordable prices to our consumers. We currently have Wi-Fi provided mostly in our cities, but we want to ensure that no matter where you are in the Federation and no matter the community, our citizens and residents have access to reliable and affordable internet services, because we believe that no one should be left behind. Now, when we speak specifically to agriculture, we have heard of ways in which farmers in Belgium and rural areas of India and even Africa have been able to connect to markets using technology. With all other industries connecting to markets using technology, agriculture should be no different. In recent times, we have been seeing that consumers are buying into the farm to table idea, and more consumers prefer to be able to have access to fresh produce. Reading from research done by the Mercy Corps AgriFin Accelerator Program in the African markets in particular, it tells us, and I quote, that digital platforms link the smallest of agricultural businesses to an expansive and overgrowing market of buyers, often bypassing middlemen and resulting in better prices for goods sold. When they operate at scale, these platforms also greatly reduce transaction costs related to aggregating and moving goods and making payments. Reliable access to markets and income makes it easier for farmers to invest in productivity enhancement, from purchasing inputs and machinery to hiring additional laborers. Digital data from platform activities can drive increased financing to farmers, both as buyers of services and sellers of produce, end of quote. This therefore means that it will be important for all our farmers to be able to have direct access, the kind of access that technology can provide. And to do so, it becomes even more imperative that countries ensure access to farmers, especially in the rural areas where most of the farmers in our region are located. In St. Kitts and Nevis, our Department of Agriculture would have collaborated with the Department of Technology to create a website that allows our farmers to have direct access to consumers by giving them the option to upload their produce lists in real time and then allow consumers to purchase directly from our farmers through this means. In 2019, our internet penetration rate was estimated at around some 81%, while our mobile penetration was around 137%. Unfortunately, these statistics do not provide a breakdown between the rates for urban and rural segments of our population. In developing the website, however, the ministry ensured that farmers would be able to access the site using their mobile phones as well. We will admit that there is still some work to be done in order to encourage more of our farmers to use the service available, and that comes with more education and training, of course, as to the use of this service. Outside of this option provided by the ministry, here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have also seen several of our farmers who have been very active on social media and who have begun to connect with consumers using social media. Our farmers are using social media to promote their farm tours, which offers consumers the option to purchase produce. This is possible because of the level of access that is provided. While the urban-rural divide in the Federation may not be as pronounced as it is in some other countries in the LAC region, I've given these examples to show what's possible and why it is important now more than ever for our countries to ensure access to all. Access to the internet in particular creates access to markets that may not have necessarily been possible otherwise. We have learned more so in this pandemic that our global community is not as wide and as big as we once assumed. The virus has touched even what is considered the most remote corners of the world. And just as the virus moved as quickly as it did, so too can the produce of local farmers with the right access to technology. I would therefore like to commend the IICA in collaboration with Microsoft and the Inter-American Development Bank for undertaking this essential research work on rural connectivity in the LAC region. And I anxiously await the upcoming presentation by two of the study's authors later in the proceedings. I look forward to receiving further insights on their findings and recommendations and learning how this body of knowledge can provide further guidance for policy formulation as we embark on our efforts to digitally transform the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. In closing, I would like to extend sincere thanks and appreciation to the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture for inviting me to participate in this historic event. I look forward to the presentations from my fellow speakers and to engaging in the discussions ahead. So once again, I say thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. You are very lucky to be part of a government of one of the most beautiful places in the world, a paradise such as St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm very happy to hear about the concept that you have in your country of bringing farm to table closer to everyone. That is very clearly related to the food strategy or the new food strategy for the European Union, that's also called like that, farm to table. So I'm glad to hear those words echoed there. And we now have a member of a country that is a leader in agriculture, that has done wonders in past decades, and has a family agriculture structure that's very important and represents the future with young people that are very much involved and will be very benefited by aspects covered in the study being launched today. A country that also is lucky enough to have initiatives like AgroConnect, that in just a few months has managed to gather several users in the rural areas to better develop their activities. So we give the floor to the Secretary of Family Agriculture and Cooperation of the Ministry of Livestock and Agriculture, Brazil, Mr. Fernando de Sorce. Go ahead. Good afternoon, and thank you, Pedro. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Minister of Agriculture from Brazil, Teresa Cristina, and on my behalf, I greet you all and thank you very much, especially Director General Manuel Otero. Thank you for inviting me in to participate in this very relevant event. On behalf of them, I also greet all of the participants in the event and all our viewers. To begin, I first have to congratulate AICA and the Inter-American Development Bank for having allowed this wonderful analysis to happen, looking at rural connectivity in Latin America and the Caribbean. The information and the data included are important inputs to build public policies for connectivity. This assessment is definitely a great contribution to all our countries. Thank you very much, AICA and IDP. I'd also like to begin by congratulating you for the title of the preface of the study, the imperative to include. Inclusion is a key word in building policies. Connectivity is the means. Inclusion of millions of agriculture and farmers is our goal, is what we want to achieve. Inclusion in public policies of our countries, inclusion in an information system and a technical assistance system, inclusion in agricultural markets, inclusion in credit policies, inclusion in social assistance programs. So inclusion is to dignify, to bring income, to guarantee livelihoods of farmers and their families in the countryside, to ensure we have gender equality policies, to include all. The Secretariat for Cooperativism and Family Agriculture in Brazil has worked along these lines. The pandemic has brought us much pain, but we've also learned a lot, and we've found opportunities to rethink about many of our processes. The pandemic has accelerated many of the actions and movements that we had developed in Brazil. There's hundreds of digital tools now to bring farmers closer to consumers, to ensure they can sell their agricultural products. All of these tools are here to stay. Less than a month ago, the Ministry of Agriculture launched the Technical Assistance Program for Digital Rural Technologies. We wish to strengthen public companies, public enterprises that provide technical assistance in our country, but also to have a good governance of the whole process. Integrating technical assistance, both public and private, with the aim of increasing from 20 to 50% the number of farmers that are helped in Brazil by 2030. If we had no digital tools, we would not dare to have such an ambitious goal. EICA is an important partner on this journey. Together, we want to implement the project of digital agricultural services to support technical assistance for rural outreach in Brazil through PAD, Precision Agriculture for Development, that uses technology, data science, and behavioral economy to provide information that is customized for small farmers in developing countries. We wish to begin these actions in 2021 in the northeast region of the country with a pilot project with 100,000 family farmers in that region, one of the poorest in Brazil. To conclude, I'd also like to say that the government of Brazil is working hard for improving connectivity by using several technologies to reach areas that really need it. A continental country such as ours also has continental challenges, but we believe that in the coming 5 years, we will see significant progress in coverages and internet connectivity, whether through satellites, nanosatellites, fiber optic, or others. We understand there's a need for $5 million to ensure connectivity in the country, and we are working along those lines. Thank you very much, and congratulations once again. You have the support of Brazil. Thank you very much, Secretary, for your contribution. And now we have the Vice Minister of Connectivity from Colombia, Ivan Mantilla. I'm not sure if I see him, though. Do we have him there? Yes, I am here. Okay, I'm here. Okay, thank you, Ivan. Thank you and good afternoon. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Pedro. Warm greetings to all. And again, and also my appreciation to the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. Thank you for the invitation, and hello to all our participants. I've been following each of your words, and I fully agree with what we've already heard from our speakers. In Latin America, although each country, in Latin America and the Caribbean, although each country has its very particular challenges linked to the realities of our countries, there are also larger challenges that are common to all. Today, and especially with the effects of COVID-19, we all have that challenge of finding new ways to ensure economic growth, how to reactivate and foster our economies. So we all have to rethink about our even economic development models that we had. So it's a big challenge to create employment as a driver of growth, and more importantly, the well-being of our citizens, our people. So we have that big challenge. Latin America for decades have been fighting for this. Although we have seen great improvements, we still have great inequalities. Some countries have managed to reduce inequality in this century, but still, if we look at it in all the region, we still have great levels of inequality where some have access to great opportunities and others, unfortunately, do not have the same access. So another big challenge also is to increase public and private productivity levels in all our countries as a very important element to ensure economic growth of our countries in the coming years. Now, if you look at that landscape, you might ask yourself, what are we missing, or what should we work on? What should be reinforced to ensure we achieve our objectives and overcome these challenges? And if we see it at a global context, we find that access to technology mediated through connectivity is a tool that enables everything that I've mentioned. We've seen specific cases where an increase in internet penetration in countries reduces levels of poverty. And this is not just something I'm saying. It's based on many studies and it has been verified. We see how increasing speed of connectivity and access to internet, the increase of that speed improves the GDP per capita levels in 1.6% by each megabyte per second that you have a higher download speed in a country. So we see that massification of internet and connectivity has an important role to overcome these challenges. But obviously, before we can enjoy this great tool, we still find a big problem. I was hearing the words of the Madam Minister from St. Kitts and Nevis and the Secretary of Agriculture in Brazil and also the Minister from Argentina. We have several things in common. The gap between certain areas in our countries. The levels of connectivity in our cities, I think, are all very okay in the whole of the continent. But if we go to certain rural areas, there are challenges. And while we have these gaps between our cities and our rural areas, internet and connectivity will not be a tool that will truly help us leverage development and ensure well-being for all our citizens throughout our regions. Particularly in Colombia, I have to say, last year, in Colombia, we only had 9.7% of people in rural areas with internet, with mobile internet. We had a spectrum survey carried out. So by 2025, we'll be able to have 80% of rural areas in Colombia covered. Of the 600 coffee growing areas, you know that in Colombia, we are great producers of coffee. So we will have access to technology to these, but in certain areas and towns, in more than 30 years now with mobile phones in Colombia, they had not had the chance of access to mobile technology. Also, very importantly, education in rural areas as a driver to ensure development of our rural areas in the medium and long term, empowering children and young people so that they may grow adequately with good education. There, we also have a big deficit. We're working on that in this government, trying to connect 10,000 population centers and public schools of rural areas and remote areas in the most far-reaching areas of the country with free internet until 2030, 2031, which is the first goal to meet the SDGs, especially those related to access and universal service for internet. So just to share some of those points with the common message, the fact that internet is an essential tool to develop our countries, to overcome the challenges we have socially and economically. And so the challenge is to accelerate these bridges, to close gaps. So I'm really glad to see that all countries have mentioned that we're all along the same lines, prioritizing access to connectivity and closing these gaps, because these are tools that will help our rural areas, our countryside, our producers and farmers to have the same opportunities that any other person may have in an urban area. I really highlight the results of this study. It is a wonderful time to hear this for all countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I really congratulate you. It has been a wonderful initiative, and it is an honor to join you today. Thank you for the time. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Minister, for your contribution of an important country for agriculture as well in Latin America and the Caribbean. And now we have Mr. Marcelo Cabrol, manager of the social sector at the Inter-American Development Bank, one of the creators, if you will, one of the drivers for this work that is being launched in this international event. Marcelo, welcome. You have the floor. Thank you, Pedro, and thank you for inviting me. This is a great opportunity. Everyone asks me, what's the social sector? Well, that's education, health, social protection, and employment. And I can't think about any of these without thinking about connectivity. I cannot imagine this without the necessary digitalization. what will happen after COVID is that we will see the gaps of this unequal region, the most unequal region in the world, become larger. That's why we are so committed with this type of study. It is something we had to do, and it's the time to do it. The study adds something else, which is the future agenda. I think this is a very important reflection. We have to think that, of course, connectivity is important. And I understand it's not easy. At the IDB, we're working on the types of public policies countries should have to provide connectivity to schools and children in rural areas that today don't have the possibility of remote education or better education than what they have today. But we also have to think about what comes after connectivity. And here our partners at ICA and Microsoft and all the countries, the member countries, of course, we work every day with them. There's two challenges we have to mention for the future. Besides connectivity, there's also the important matter of equipment. And equipment we use, or tools we use to connect, have to be democratized. They have to be taken to rural areas, and they have to be affordable and accessible. And very importantly, if we think about social sectors, first, we need platforms. The content of this connectivity has to be something that will not just provide better services, but it has to be adapted to the needs and conditions of rural areas. It's not the same thing to educate digitally and with connectivity in a city than in a rural area. And that adaptation is important. We must not forget it. We may have connectivity, but if we don't have content, it's just half the job done. And we need something else, which is education to use the content and the connectivity. So we need to prepare our human resources to ensure they broadly use connectivity and the content that is provided through digital media. It's the agenda that has to be included for the future. So I'd rather leave you with those two thoughts. Well, first of all, congratulations for the study. It was a great study. And the big challenge of seeing if we can work on these other two areas that I believe are fundamental to move towards the future. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much, Marcelo, for your words. And thank you for the work you're doing at the IDB, so important for all the population of the area. We now have words from the Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, Roxana Polastri, who will be talking to us from Rome. Good afternoon, Roxana. You have the floor. Thank you, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you. Good morning to some, good afternoon to others. I'm speaking to you from Rome, and I'm very, very glad to join you in the presentation of this study. We've heard already from you, but just let me echo the words and highlight the importance of the topic. The study will not just help, as we heard, to support public policy development. It's also very useful for financial institutions such as IFAD, where digital economy is at the very core of our project. So this is very valuable work, not just at a time of pandemic. It will be for the post-pandemic era as well. Information technologies and communication technologies, even at its simplest, cell phone, can and must provide access to information for family agriculture on all aspects of life, but also directly to markets and consumers. Aware of this, the IFAD recently approved a strategy for information and communication technologies for development, acknowledging that these ICTs can have an important role to increase agricultural productivity, increase income of producers, resilience with the effects of climate change, and their access to markets. ICTs were already part of our work, and we have incorporated them into our operations, both in project management, and also in monitoring and assessing their impacts to later use future information to better manage knowledge. Using ICTs in our country strategies and our projects is a mandate that is mandatory now for all the countries of the region. So connectivity of end users of our projects is one of our priorities. And it's included in the reactivation and resilience strategy that we are implementing from IFAD in Latin America and the Caribbean. In our reaction to the pandemic, ICTs have played an important role in projects in Brazil. For example, there's a technical assistance system for monitoring and assessment remotely with mobile phones. We also contacted beneficiaries of our projects with the UN Global Compact technology platform to sell services through the web. Once this pandemic started, we also created a stimulus fund for poor rural populations as a response. And we also approved a project to include countries like Bolivia, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, and Peru, providing technical assistance to small producers using ICTs and public-private partnerships to sell their products through online platforms or markets. So ICTs are definitely at the very core of our work. We continue working, designing applications to help our technicians better follow up our working plans and family agriculture organizations. And they, of course, benefit with the support of our projects. We can also access key information on climate, agricultural inputs, and direct sales platforms and food companies. So I'd like to close by thanking you, Manuel, and all your team for insisting on looking into the future, for believing and continuing to believe, as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development says, to have a global society with no hunger, no extreme poverty, leaving no one behind. So congratulations for the work. Thank you very much, Rosana. I also have to condemn the wonderful work that your agency does, closely linked to FAO. And congratulations on all your work, and thank you for your support in the forum. Now we will have some words by a representative of intense work of a worldwide company to help facilitate things for everyone, from domestic users that may not be very technology savvy to professionals that are developing new applications and methods to help make our lives easier for companies, for institutions, international organizations. This is Microsoft. What would us mortals do without those windows in our lives? We could not even have right ventilation in times of pandemic. It's a metaphor, but still, windows are essential, and they are there in everyone's lives. From the very moment a child starts using a tablet and using new technologies, up to professionals that are using them intensively. We have Luciano Braverman, Senior Education Director for Microsoft Latin America, representing this leading company in the launch of an important document where Microsoft has also participated. So thank you, Luciano. You have the floor. Welcome. Thank you, Pedro, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. It is really a pleasure to be here with you. Another very special moment with AICA. I feel very close to AICA because of everything that we've been working on already. And obviously, it's great to share with all the wonderful guests we have from the sector. Director General Manuel Otero, esteemed ministers, warm greetings to everybody. If I had to give you my perspective, for me, looking at the transformation of ideas and visions into real actions is spectacular. So I want to thank you, Manuel, Jorge, for leading this initiative. This is such an important matter for our whole region, as we've heard from everyone this morning. This project is certainly a milestone along the way and on this shared journey with AICA. I personally feel very enthusiastic. I want to see how this partnership will continue evolving. It was about 2.5 years ago where we started just visualizing possibilities. And today it is a reality with one more project underway. I'm also very happy to see Marcelo, and especially because we can work together with the IDB and just being able to participate in this type of study that has great impact in all the region, and to include these ideas and concepts and indices that did not exist, or at least were not consolidated in a single place. So I think that is a great advantage of this report, and it's great to have the team achieve this. I have to congratulate all the team that worked on the study because it's truly a magnificent document. You can see how they worked passionately for this. At Microsoft, we understand that a connected population has absolutely many more opportunities to work, opportunities to create income, to access knowledge, and to access services. Even medicine, there's telemedicine today that's so important. And fundamentally, always education, content, hybrid or online education, as we heard from Marcelo. It's absolutely essential. It's a key, and we have to highlight the important impact this has, a positive impact, and how this can extend to the social and productive areas if you have full connectivity provided to all rural areas. We heard Marcelo say that connectivity is a very important part of the process, but we have to add to that devices, content, cultural transformation, and just to support that whole change process somehow. It's not necessarily straightforward. And if we do not support this transformation, we are only doing it halfway. We are aiming to achieve inclusion, accessibility, and diversity. So as we have seen with the acceleration of technologies in rural areas, it has certainly contributed to increasing productivity levels. We've seen areas that may have fallen behind, and through using technology for their crops, they have notably progressed. Because of that, especially using artificial intelligence, sensors, and just gaining different insights to improve the environment. At Microsoft, we are fully committed to these matters, not just with connectivity, but even more so with accessibility, inclusion, and diversity through education. And to close, I have to say that this is a priority for us. We will continue working on these efforts to bring connectivity to our rural areas in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this study is just a show of that. So thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you, Luciano, for your contributions and for the work that you have done at Microsoft to ensure the dreams of many people can come true, and for helping enterprises and initiatives that we see throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. I believe Rosana Polastri has to leave us, so we go ahead and say goodbye to her. Thank you very much for her participation in this event. Thank you for IFET's participation. And now we will have the words of Nilo Pasquali, Superintendent of Planning and Regulation at the National Telecommunications Agency of Brazil, Anatel. He represents in this launch the contributions provided by regulators and the important role they have in ensuring everything works out fine and as regulated in different countries, so that telecommunications and connectivity, as we see in the study, can be done in an orderly manner and accessible to all who wish to participate along the frameworks each state provides. And it represents an instrument to perform initiatives in an orderly fashion. So welcome, Nilo. You have the floor. Thank you very much. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Otero for inviting me. Thank you to AICA for launching this study that is so important. As we heard, Anatel is our regulatory organization for telecommunications in Brazil. Our main focus and concern is obviously in connectivity. It's very clear to us, as we've heard from other speakers as well, that connectivity is a fundamental element that can ensure the participation of all other sectors of economy. Digital society, as we are living through now, more than ever, we can see how it's absolutely necessary to provide connectivity to all, to provide quality connections, to ensure that services and applications that are necessary are there for all. So the main focus of us, not just for Anatel, but for any regulator of telecommunication sectors in any country of the world, it's absolutely the first thing we have to ensure, having infrastructure for telecommunications that can reach the diverse spaces of every country. Brazil is a continental country, of course. We have our very large challenges. We have connections and coverage of mobile phones with 4G networks at around 89% of our population covered with 4G technologies. And now we have to look at the differences between the rural and urban areas, which again is a main focus. Then this changes a lot. If we look at our rural population today, it's at around 39% covered. But of course, if we look at it geographically, even in the space of all Brazil, again, the figures change quite a lot. And it can be at around 11% of the inland in Brazil with 4G coverage. So this shows that we have a wonderful challenge ahead of us to ensure we can cover our rural areas. These are large areas with low density of population. So that necessarily assumes that we need smart public policy to elevate connectivity in these specific areas. So the role of regulators and ministers and all public agencies is to find smart alternatives to ensure that coverage for our more remote areas. Anatel traditionally has used different mechanisms to broaden infrastructure in Brazil. And we have great opportunities now in the country to find and use radio frequencies with 5G to start bringing this. These, again, are great opportunities. to bring infrastructure, and this should not be different now if we look at our public policies, trying to find all types of diverse mechanisms to ensure that connectivity. But of course, for that, we need sectoral funds that can act and help us to get that connectivity where it is needed. Financing policies for service providers, whether small or large. In Brazil, we also have a very interesting characteristic that a large part of the connectivity in the inland of the country is in the hands of small service providers. In Brazil, we have about 8 large national groups operating, but we have more than 9,000 companies around the country providing connectivity, broadband and fixed connectivity in the inland of the country. So these are going to be working on that, the needs for connectivity as well. So we see that we cannot find a single solution or one size fits all for all Brazil. We need to find ways to ensure connectivity to all areas that are needing it. So for this, I believe that this study is absolutely fundamental. It brings us very interesting measures to analyze and to guide us in this process of designing our public policies to ensure that we can better cater to these specific remote areas. So it's great potential there. And thank you for this space, Areik. It's very interesting to hear from this study. Once again, I'm really thankful for being here, and thank you for letting me speak with you. Thank you very much for your words and your ideas, and for sharing the role of the regulatory entity in such a large and diverse country where connectivity is essential, of course, such as Brazil. The Minister of St. Kitts has also had to leave us, and she apologizes. So I apologize on her behalf as well. And with that, we now have the presentation of the study itself. This wonderful work that is being now launched, Rural Connectivity in Latin America and the Caribbean, a Bridge to Sustainable Development During a Pandemic. For that, we have the contribution of the researcher from AICA, Ms. Sandra Ziegler. You first have the floor. Go ahead. And good afternoon, Sandra. Thank you and welcome. Thank you very much. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. I am very honored to share the results of this study with you. It's something that we developed in collaboration with AICA, IDB, and Microsoft, and it wants to compile and produce information on the status of rural connectivity in Latin America and the Caribbean. We use quantitative sources that are available that helped us create an index to measure the status of rural connectivity, complemented by a series of semi-structured interviews responded by 39 key stakeholders of public and private sectors of the countries. We also had a focus group, and we looked at contributions in forums of young people and rural women, which were also included. So what's the state of connectivity in Latin America and the Caribbean? Let's look at some facts. The region is at an intermediate level if we compare it to the rest of the world in terms of development of digital systems. 32% of the Latin American population, that's 244 million people, do not have access to internet. Of all the people that do not have access to internet, 46 million live in rural territories. There is a large imbalance among countries and within them, and the gap is larger if we compare it with urban and rural populations, with men and women, indigenous populations, and other groups that are in the lowest quintiles of income. This means less opportunities, less quality of life, and it means that many sectors of the rural areas are left out. For those countries that have available information that's official, in 2019, 71% of urban population had connectivity options, at least 37% had that in rural areas. With that, we have a gap of 34 percentage points that brings consequences to the productive social and economic development, and of course results in lower quality of life for rural communities. These figures refer to connectivity. But we also know that the needs and requirements today for the use of technologies, whether for production, medicine, education, or other public services, need not just good connections, but regular and frequent use. So this study also advances in the idea of having more information based on what we already have to truly understand the status of connectivity in the region. Let's look at progress in this type of information from other devices. For this, we have Joaquin Arias. You have the floor. Thank you, Sandra, and good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to share the results of this index of significant rural connectivity. As we've heard already, connectivity impacts all activities of human beings, socially, environmentally, economically, and it also made us think about how to measure access, not just access itself, but quality of access using official statistics that could help us compare countries, urban and rural areas, and measure the gaps we may have. Considering the limitations we have in Latin America in terms of data compilation that do not necessarily distinguish between rural and urban areas, we had this calculation performed for only 7 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. Luckily enough, the Inter-American Development Bank recently published the Broadband Index, the Broadband Development Index. So that allowed us to extrapolate these results to the rest of the countries of Latin America. In this study, we are using the concept of significant connectivity. So not just talking about access, but also quality. And it is comprised of 4 dimensions. For regular use of internet. 2, the fact that people have the right device to connect, whether it's a mobile phone or a computer, that people have enough data according to their needs, and that the speed is appropriate. Of the average of those indicators with these dimensions, we get the index of significant connectivity for rural and urban areas. It varies from 0 to 1, and if you multiply it by 100, it gives us the percentage of penetration of connectivity, of significant connectivity in rural and urban areas. For the 7 countries we analyzed, the results are that 63% of the population has access to the connectivity, and 75% urban areas. So if we say it differently, there's a large percentage of people in rural areas that don't have the right quality or the same quality as urban areas. Just by looking at Brazil, that's 75% given the weight it has. That's 75% of the population not having significant connectivity. In the graph, we see the correlation between the index of significant connectivity, urban areas, and that's in the horizontal axis. We see different clusters or groups of countries according to their connectivity, high, low, or medium. And the red dot line shows the line of equality if we had similar or equal connectivity between urban and rural areas. Of course, then the difference gives us the gap. The calculation tells us that the urban-rural gap for significant connectivity is twice as high in urban areas as rural areas. This is critical information, as we've seen. If we analyze the main components of the index, we found the main connections between the different variables of the index. A component that dominates most of the data is the relationship between the use of internet. So the more use, the more availability or access to broadband, and the more availability to personal computers. There's also the opposite relation. The less you use internet, it may be explained because there's less availability of broadband or devices. That explains about 55% of all variability in the data. The second component is explained through availability of 4G technologies, talking about speed, and having smartphones. So daily use of internet is lower or higher depending on the availability, and these two components are alternatives. If there's no broadband, you access 4G technologies. So the availability and well, the index of broadband development recently published by the IDB does not differentiate between rural and urban areas, but we could extrapolate our results, and we see the graph with the high correlation between the broadband index of the IDB and our index for significant rural connectivity. The green dots are our calculations and how you extrapolate to the rest of the countries, again with clusters of countries according to high, medium, and low connectivity. This helps us calculate and see that approximately 77 million rural inhabitants in Latin America of the 24 countries in the sample do not have access to connectivity with the minimum quality standards that are necessary, as we've mentioned, for significant connectivity. We believe that this type of study can help prioritize public policies and differentiated policies, especially to provide connectivity to all areas with all the implications and impacts we've heard. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Joaquin. So why are we focusing on this issue? On the most part of all previous presenters also highlighted the importance of connectivity in this context of disruption with COVID-19 that gives us even a greater magnitude of the marginalization of certain populations in Latin America in terms of the use of internet, bringing focus to the importance of closing the gap in countries and accelerating investment in infrastructure, providing support services. The potential impact of connectivity would be, according to measurements of the Inter-American Union of Telecommunications, for 2018, an increase of 1% of fixed broadband worldwide would lead to an increase of 0.08% of GDP. For mobile broadband, a growth of 1% increases 0.15% of the GDP. And in terms of its relation to digitalization, increasing 1% of the index of the digital ecosystem development increases the GDP by 0.13%. The digital ecosystem impacts on labor productivity. So 1% of an increase of the digitalization index increases 0.26% of productivity. Therefore, the investment in connectivity leads to great returns for the economy. As we've heard, the existing disparities between rural and urban areas that Joaquin also mentioned, there's also an aggregation of gaps in the rural areas. And we will be talking about the situation of women and the education restrictions that are now more intense in current scenarios. If we're talking about women, we have the aggregation of gaps. Considering this situation, recently there's a study created for Latin America overall between Oxford University, IICA, IDB, and IFAD, showing that inequalities in education, income, and employment that happen on the offline universe are also linked to digital inequalities. And these can be amplified and even worsen gender inequalities. The study I mentioned shows the social and economic implications and provides evidence in terms of the potential for mobile phones as vehicles for sustainable development. In Latin America and the Caribbean, there's a gender gap in use of mobile phones or ownership of mobile phones. It's gradually reducing, but it still is not resulting in the improvements we would like to see in the past 5 years. The study also measured the gender gap for rural women in access to cell phone technology. And with data from a survey, we've seen differences in ownership of mobile phones with women and men for 23 countries in Latin America. In 17 of the 23 countries analyzed, it's less likely for women to have a mobile phone than men. Some countries have wide disparities, such as Argentina and Brazil. Others have achieved almost full equality, gender equality in terms of ownership of cell phones, but others, like Guatemala and Peru, women are still at a disadvantaged situation. And for Chile and Uruguay, the proportion tends to be in favor of women. In the forum we created this year for rural women at ICA and equality with the COVID-19 pandemic, an important conclusion there was that we need to improve access to land, water, and connectivity for women and to close gender gaps affecting food security in the Americas. If we look at the educational situation, there's a series of gaps that are aggregated in rural areas as well, provided because of these connectivity issues. In the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, we see clearly the distances between those who have resources and access to information and technology and those who are being left behind. And this situation definitely operates to accelerate the need to align digital agendas of different countries with the educational public policies. In Latin America, 33% of schools have access to broadband or sufficient internet speed. This is less than half of that reported of all OECD countries on average. And if we look at the gaps of students based on their location, whether rural or urban areas, this is 35 percentage points higher in Latin America than in the average. Less than 15% of rural schools have access to broadband or enough internet speed. And the same situation is recorded in access to internet in rural homes, according to the IDB this year. And from the IDB as well, they calculate that about 25% of students that are enrolled in schools are not attending classes face-to-face in any of the educational areas. This leads to disadvantages, again, producing new inequalities. If we look at the map on screen, we clearly see the issues with access of students in rural environments, access to internet. We see there's a situation of some being left behind and great differences among countries. We also have to say that talking about education, as I said before, we are referring to not just getting the connectivity, but also having devices available and digital literacy that is important to ensure process of generational change in rural areas and preparing citizens that can understand and transform their environment fully. If we look at the main problems considering connectivity gaps that we've identified in this study, there's a series of problems, especially if we just look at infrastructure. First, we have to say that we have obsolete regulatory frameworks. Some of them refer to previous technologies. And of course, the situation of technological change demands adjusting your regulatory frameworks. There's also problems with installation, given the state of infrastructure in different countries. There's also difficulty in some places linked to the geographies and the more remote territories. For routes and electricity. There's also a lack of infrastructure mapping with enough information on telecommunications networks. So we need to identify areas without coverage that have the potential to be connected. There's also the fact that the investment costs are very high. This means there's less cost effectiveness for operating companies. This was brought up by them. And so in these cases, they are not encouraged to invest in more remote areas. Linked to this, there's also a scarcity of stimuli that can lead to these investments in rural areas. And lastly, there's difficulties in terms of accessibility and affordability for devices. There's a larger cost of mobile and internet telephony for those living in rural areas. And this is a paradox because precisely those who need it the most and are at most disadvantaged have to pay the largest costs to be able to connect and to access. If we talk about the strategies in the study and potential solutions to reduce the coverage gap in rural areas, we found 3 different models for connectivity reaching the most remote areas. First, public-private partnerships. Second, endogenous alternatives created by communities themselves. And thirdly, partnerships with public sector and international cooperation. On this slide, we show some of the experiences. In the document, we have collected many more that you can look in detail. So first of all, in Latin America, LAC, with a partnership with PAD, the Precision Agriculture for Development organization founded by the Nobel Prize winner Michael Kremer and the Ministry of Agriculture and Supplies of Brazil, it provides an option for family agriculture and farmers to receive personalized services through their mobile phones to include digital services and technical assistance and agricultural outreach. This is essential for some of the most vulnerable sectors in agriculture to improve their income and have a better productivity and a better lifestyle, and also better development for the whole economy and the environment. Similarly to this, since 2017, Microsoft in Colombia joined efforts with Lavazza, an Italian company that roasts coffee, with the Ministry of Information Technologies and the National Agency of Spectrum in Colombia. And they have a program that supports families in the Department of Meta, where they provide sustainable production of coffee based on ICTs provided by these partners. The program also helps provide internet to certain services to ensure connectivity for remote or dispersed areas. Some of the endogenous alternatives for communities we find include a strong presence of cooperatives and small companies, and technological initiatives from communities themselves, where connectivity is provided by service providers through local small-scale initiatives. These are not always reflected in the statistics, and this is also a red flag to see that there may be some underrepresentation of this type of connectivity provision. There's experiences in this sense in many countries of the region. Just to highlight some, in Mexico, in indigenous territories of Oaxaca, in Argentina, in the mountains of Córdoba, in Brazil, as we heard from Nilo Pasquali, where 9,000 companies are reaching the most remote areas. These options show that there's not a single way to solve connectivity matters and provide it for all spaces. And in the same, we can find options according to different contexts. This is a very specific issue that was emphasized by some of those interviewed as comments that they gave. And as for public-private partnerships and international cooperation, we also have a series of experiences based on the microeducational context. These are important experiences to rethink about how to bring connectivity to rural areas globally. First, there's a program Lights for Learning developed by the OEI for different countries in the region that provides solar panels and thus ensures electricity and, of course, connectivity. And then there's two programs, one for acceleration of development of education in the Amazon, PADEM, in Brazil, in collaboration with the IDB, and experiences of rural secondary high schools with ICTs in Argentina, in the Northeast and Northwest, allowing connectivity of rural schools and connection through satellite, so that educators that may be in urban spaces and more important cities can help bring this to remote areas, providing guidance to students that are there with their tutors. These are some of the projects that we highlight because they are using technological options that are optimal to ensure accessibility to more remote areas, whether through their geography or because there's not basic infrastructure present. They can also be expanded, and these are alternatives that we have to continue exploring to see how they may be scaled and to include them in public policies to ensure continuity beyond the presence of cooperation organizations. Some of the recommendations we have are first, the importance of universalizing connectivity and disseminating digital technologies, which are pillars for the future of agricultural production. We need public policies to address the situation of rural connectivity gaps in Latin America and the Caribbean. Linked to this and having these public policies, we also have to ensure that countries include in their statistical records differentiation between sectors such as urban and rural. This is an essential condition to ensure we can provide public policies that are evidence-based and on true assessments. It is also fundamental to know the situation of quality of connectivity in the territories. This means that we need to ensure public-private actions and actions in different communities with local governments, academia, and other sectors. This is a problem that needs us to join efforts among different sectors to ensure we can achieve it. It is also essential to address affordability in terms of access to connectivity and also to devices. This is a very important problem recorded. Access to connectivity is not just limited in rural territories, it is also more expensive. And this, of course, has to be contemplated. We also need public policies that can ensure states invest in construction of infrastructure to develop the regulatory instruments that can help incentivize private investment reaching the more needed areas. We also have to see whether the current situation is due to market issues, which would need a public intervention, or if the obstacles refer to competition, where we would probably have to just look at regulation and the competition authority. It's also important to consider that countries have to have infrastructure maps that are more comprehensive to identify the origin of current failures and to intervene in solutions. There are no single solutions. Sorry, as I've said before, there was consensus on this of those interviewed as well. We need different types of adjustments for different types of areas, satellite solutions and others that can help provide more connectivity in remote areas that make it more accessible. And lastly, also, as we heard from previous presentations and also from our interviews, besides connectivity, which is the first step, we need something else to support that. We need to have specific content to feed the demand for connectivity in rural areas as a way to provide better expansion and use of new technologies of information and communication. So in a way, we're saying that the demand can also lead to improvements. Closing the gap, the connectivity gap, would bring associated improvements for production, economic benefits, access to cultural goods, to services that would improve quality of life and development. Many of the initiatives provided in the document show that it is imperative to include this problem in the public agenda, given the great potential of technologies to improve quality of life for millions of men and women that are linked to this and who are not being covered today. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Sandra. You've both made a wonderful presentation. I apologize to Joaquin. I should have introduced him beforehand, along with Sandra. I just thought that the order was different. I apologize for that. So for all of those who do not know him, Joaquin is a technical specialist of the Center for Strategic Analysis of Agriculture, CAESPA at AICA. And of course, along with Sandra, you are one of the main brains behind this study. And I also have to apologize on behalf of Danilo Pasquali, who had to leave us as he had other commitments. And now we have some space for interaction. We will hear more insights after these wonderful contributions already. And after clarifying the state of affairs, and as we've heard very clearly from Sandra and Joaquin, your intervention helped clarify many of the elements. And so now we have participation of our expert journalists of the region who understand what this entails. I'm sure they have wonderful questions and some food for thought, and hopefully maybe put you on the spot a bit so that we can all learn from this. So first of all, we have Hugo Castellano, who works as an agricultural communications consultant in Mexico, although he is from another country, but he is based in Mexico. He knows the country well, and he works hard in Mexico. I'm sure he will give us interesting ideas to bring a good discussion. Hugo, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you very much to AICA, IDB, Microsoft, Manuel Otero, for the possibility of having this contact to bring value to such a key issue for the whole region and the world. Connectivity and all the possibilities and opportunities it entails for agricultural activities. It's absolutely significant. I would say this is a historical study, absolutely relevant. And once again, thank you to the Director General of AICA, emphasizing the value of communication of all these topics that are so relevant, as I insist. At the same time, congratulations, Sandra, Joaquin, for your brilliant work and a wonderful presentation. It has provided great insights to all. And I know we have other prestigious speakers, so I'll be brief. My question for Joaquin and Sandra, in your wonderful work that you've done thanks to AICA, IDB, Microsoft, what is the biggest limitation to ensure significant connectivity? Is it education, infrastructure, public policy, developing accessible, affordable, portable technologies, the geographies, the levels of investment needed. What would you say is the greatest limitation to ensure significant connectivity to improve agri-food activities? As you've said, Hugo, this is very it has a myriad of issues participating in the problem and many stakeholders as well. So if we look at it that way, it's difficult to say there's a single cause or a single element that might help improve things on its own. Therefore, the study in its recommendations invites recurrent and concurrent actions among all stakeholders that are key to ensure that this can be improved upon. Now, if you allow me, it is interesting to see that some solutions are very much within reach and they're being developed in many countries already. So it may just be necessary to ensure the existence of certain synergies, of coordinating certain elements, of joining efforts. We understand that the decision of AIC, IDB, and Microsoft goes along those lines. It's not thinking of a single stakeholder, a single variable that impacts. It's a myriad of variables. Thank you. I'm sure there's much to do regionally as well, especially those of us who work in communication, to strengthen these elements that ensure connectivity can be truly achieved. Thank you very much, Hugo. We also have from another country, Colombia, Mr. Juan Carlos Dominguez. You may have heard about the journal El Tiempo and the blog called Tierras y Granados. So we have Juan Carlos Dominguez from that publication who's joining us today. Juan Carlos, go ahead. Thank you, Pedro. Interesting presentation by Sandra and Joaquin. I have a specific question. It can be answered by any of the two. In your study, did you find any examples that are good examples for other countries to follow? Well, there's an interesting key, if you will, to activate and observe. And it's related to countries that have incentives for connectivity to reach rural areas. And there's some initiatives that we identified. And in those cases, better opportunities are opened up. So our recommendations also list the need to have policies to encourage different sectors to reach these most remote areas with their connectivity. This is a very important element that we've seen in the study, and it helps explain in part certain advances and potential differentials we see in the region. And so those incentives that you mentioned, or to go back a bit, are those private or public investments? And if public, the investments received, the incentives received by investors, are they tax related or benefits for an investment? So where are those benefits for companies to truly want to work on rural connectivity? Well, of course, there are public and private investments. There's some bids that are made for connectivity. These types of open bids are always a good form of encouragement. As I said, in the case of Colombia, there's also some tax benefits for smaller cooperatives or companies that are reaching the most far off places. That's an important encouragement. But again, there's no single formula. That's why we said that it is so important to look for alternatives to find custom-made solutions. But of course, we do need incentives. Thank you, Sandra, very much. Thank you. We also have the great luck of having a wonderful professional with us that knows all the ins and outs of Latin American agriculture, especially South America. He's the editor of the agricultural and rural supplement of very well-known and emblematic newspaper, Clarín, from Argentina, with Ricardo Kishburn as general editor. I had the great luck to share many times with him. We have Hector Huergo with us. He's a kind of an encyclopedia of agricultural and journalism of Argentina. He has so much knowledge, so many anecdotes, and a very exact vision of the potential problems and needs of the sector in this very productive country in South America. Good afternoon, Hector. Go ahead. Hector, you are on mute. I first wanted to say that I had to thank you so much for everything that you said about me. It's a bit overwhelming. No, it's not just my words. It's well known. But thank you. I'm very glad to work at Clarín. I'm also a good friend of Ricardo Kirschbaum, our editor. So first, it's a comment, a kind of mea culpa, because I remember I wrote some 20 years back questioning Peter Draker when he said, in his vision of what needed to be done, he said, let's forget about concrete highways. We need information highways. And in Argentina at that time, we were just trying to see how we could reach our ports. And the big irony of being more competitive with our products and to reaching markets. So I defended concrete highways back then. And it's a different time. It was pre-internet. Nobody could have imagined back then where we would be today, 20, 25 years later. This great foundational event is certainly a wonderful milestone in terms of connectivity. What I saw in the interventions and what I read in the document is a vision that very rightly focuses on the social impact of connectivity technologies and significant connectivity, both relating to education, rurality, and quality of life, and farm to table. That includes agriculture and the urban rural lives all over the world. But I'm also seeing implications of how connectivity is so fundamental for new hard technologies, if you will. And for those that seem to have less social impact, but in the end have as much impact as anything that goes directly to the human factor, which is remote monitoring of agricultural tasks that will give rise to what we're already seeing, the robotization. Robotization sometimes is seen as something inhuman, but it's really humanizing work because it means that those that before had to work hard labor with their own bodies can now do it. A young kid, after they finish schoolwork, if they have a good computer use, they can use robots to milk cows. So I also see a good opportunity of bringing together all this social problematic that needs rural hardware and software with connectivity, satellites, macro satellites, micro satellites, whatever we have. And this will lead to a need for resources in the public sector and policies overall. If companies need the connectivity because their business depends on it, over here in Argentina, crop machines are connected to headquarters. So there's national factories, very few, but there's some national factories and some international ones like John Deere, Case, New Color. These international companies have on the machines monitoring systems, online systems that help them see whether something is working, is not working right, if something is about to fail in the machine, and they can let you know in real time when you're operating to correct that or to stop. But that may not necessarily happen because of a lack of connectivity if you have 150 hectares of corn or rice planted. These are potential partners, these companies, for these new alternatives. In Argentina this year, we had some episodes of insecurity that were more uncomfortable, not so much in terms of economic impact, which were ruptures of certain stock areas. And there were 3 companies that came up to offer services or solutions that are connected to the internet, but they cannot do that all the time because there's no connectivity to offer the service. So sometimes you have your silo that was not broken, or that was broken on purpose by someone that wanted to affect a producer or for political reasons. But then there's also the case where there's a fox or another type of wild animal that crept up into the silo and broke it, and nobody knows until they go 15 days later to the field. Now there's tools that help us have the information in real time. There's actually a Swiss company with a device that emits through satellite every half hour. That might be enough. So it's in Switzerland. And there's 2 companies in Argentina that have tried to do the same thing, but they can't use satellites. They have to use telephone networks. And of course, they don't have the same penetration and possibilities. So to summarize my comment, more than a question, but it might lead to a question, is if you consider it interesting to connect to all stakeholders beyond those you're already talking to, because this also goes much beyond the social aspects we've seen. It covers technology, hardware, and everything else. Access, in the end, is facilitated if there's business behind it too. So that's a common question to debate. Thank you very much, Hector. I agree. I would like to highlight some of the messages we've already heard, the confluence of factors that feed upon each other. We can't just talk about infrastructure. We also have to ensure we are looking at available technologies, applications, also looking at the content that should be included, thinking about the different economic, social, productive needs, education, as we've heard, which is absolutely essential to be able to truly use what's available. And one of the things we also saw in the interaction between the significant connectivity index and the broadband development index is that the broadband development index also includes progress of countries in terms of policies, regulations, incentives for investment, and others. So all these factors come together to ensure better connectivity, which of course has to be quality connectivity, and that it also can lead to better use of technologies with the impact we would like to see in terms of productivity and well-being, of course. Sandra, would you like to add anything? I'm sorry, we're having audio issues. It's getting cut up. The social dimension for certain technologies basically mean creating opportunities. There's another central aspect that we try to shed light on, all the opportunities that are lost in the context of the pandemic. It worsens the crisis, if you will. Incorporating technologies for agricultural activities. And so connectivity has to first be solved to ensure we have the right opportunities. Thank you. I just wanted to bring that up. It's a very interesting response from both of you. Thank you. Yes, I didn't know that you had these crop machines with these types of chips. See, he knows everything. And now we have another emblematic leading journalist of the region that also represents one of the largest and most important publications of the continent, Hoya of São Paulo. This is Mauro Catalán, who will be also joining us with his question on this event. Mauro, the floor is yours. Thank you. First of all, I have to congratulate Manuel and all his team at AICA and the companies that are involved and the organizations that participated in this study that shows us a snapshot. And the data are not necessarily encouraging for now. I'd like to go a bit deeper with Sandra that helped in the study or collaborated in creating it. We see the picture of what we have. And in the countries, we're all expecting 5G to come into our countries. How can this change connectivity for agriculture and rural areas once it gets here? Sandra, will you take that up? Or you can go ahead, Joaquin. 5G? Well, according to recent data, availability of 5G and the progress to ensure we can have 5G in the region are present in very few countries. And of course, you can imagine the type of speed this will bring. That, of course, is one of the components you will expect to see greater speed, allowing for everything that we heard from Hector, precision agriculture, Internet of Things, blockchain, all these technologies that are already available, and which would not be feasible without the right speed. We certainly have to make great efforts to truly ensure that 5G comes to the region. It does not seem to be something that will happen soon, at least. So we have to ensure we cover all the gaps and bridge the gaps that we have to even access 4G first. But of course, it would be a wonderful opportunity, and that encourages us to continue improving in the region. Anything else, Mauro? Well, going on with that same question, 5G would probably help us improve with everything because it's much better than 4G. It's much faster than what we have today. So it is a goal to aspire to. Yes, it would likely be so. Up to now, what we've investigating, just the presence of 4G in Brazil is quite broad, but in other countries, there's still many restrictions to that. So yes, of course, hopefully we could make that big leap and have 5G. That would certainly open up many opportunities, as we heard from Joaquin. But just from the interviews we've carried out and the conversations we had with different representatives and regulators even, or businesses, 5G is not necessarily the most certain scenario soon for the region, but it is on the works. Thank you. Good. And now we have the time for our closing words on this connectivity study. For that, we have the Director of Technical Cooperation of AICA, another Argentinian that is very well prepared, Federico Villarreal, who will be joining us for the closing words. Federico, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. Thank you, Pedro. Good afternoon. Good day for those who are closer to the tropics. First, I have to acknowledge the wonderful presentation by Sandra, Joaquin, all the work they've done together, along with all the authors that participated in the end in creating the document itself. Also, with the recognition, I have to acknowledge all the team at AICA, especially Jorge Huertain, who helped lead the initiative from the very beginning and brought his uncurdled force to this very urgent project. Thank you to our strategic partners as well, IDB and Microsoft, who trusted this project from the very beginning and who will understand that we have to work on closing the digital gaps along with other partners and common friends. The wonderful interventions by our fellow journalists as well, who help us clarify and improved the presentation by Joaquin and Sandra. As we heard from our Director General, Manuel Otero, at the beginning of the event, what we're doing is a large call to close connectivity gaps, to accelerate connectivity in rural areas. This gap to be bridged brings with it several challenges. The importance of developing content to reduce it in rural areas. Therefore, solving connectivity is just the first step. It is a necessary step, of course, to continue solving issues with our digital gaps. Digital gaps, as I said, and as we heard in the beginning and through our interventions, it requires content development. This involves access to medicine, knowledge, security, information that will help us increase productivity and improve it, as well as rights, such as the right to education, improving quality of life and access and opportunities for rural areas and rural people. In these times, more so than before, progressing in this sense is vital for inclusion. It is vital for leaving no one behind. For this, it is necessary for the private and public sector to work together, businesses, governments, media, all actors of the public sector, in a great coalition to promote and extend connectivity to rural areas of the Caribbean and Latin America. Along with the IFDA and IFAD, and Microsoft, we're already starting our steps along this. The objective of the study is to provide information. This, of course, has been met, and they've gone beyond that. The study helps us see the situation, the state of affairs, the voices of stakeholders involved in these issues. It also helps us understand the impact that might seem obvious, but is reflected and quantified and highlighted in the study. This study also tells us where we can continue moving along, how we can start reducing that connectivity gap. We also heard at the beginning that this study is important as it is relevant to help develop public policy, and it's important for financing institutions with good information, good press, leadership, and proposals, policies, and financing. We can help reduce the gap. First, getting connectivity, and then closing the gap to improve our rural areas and agriculture. Connectivity of all rural inhabitants, especially young people and women, shows, as we've seen with data and examples in the study, that it increases productivity, improves commercialization, contributes to getting new generations working in agriculture, empowers those least favored in rural area. It fosters bioeconomy, spreads knowledge and strategic use to improve yields and crops, implementing good agricultural practices, and overall having more income and a better quality of life for people in the countryside. This transformation is also aligned with others at AICA under the leadership of Dr. Otero and our partners. We're all proud of this. As we've heard them already, but I think we have to once again mention them: the Center for Interpreting Agriculture of Tomorrow, CIMAC, Fab Lab, the alliance with PAD, and other initiatives that we are so proud of because they all go in the same path: connectivity and reducing the digital gap. This is not just a need, it is something that is demanded of international cooperation, institutions, and stakeholders in agriculture and rurality. So, all of us. So, because of all this and everything we've heard today, we should celebrate. A celebration is a good way to describe this event, and this is a wonderful step forward, a very significant step. We understand this is a necessary path we have to follow, and it will bring with it a revolution in agriculture and rurality of our hemisphere. We are sure that we can do this together. Producers are expecting this of us and much more. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Federico, for your closing words. And now I have to thank the organizers. I have to express my own gratitude for these 135 minutes of great content and brilliant contributions, especially the partners that made this study possible: Microsoft, IDB. And we will not just leave abruptly. I invite you all to attend as spectators to another wonderful contribution, a cultural contribution, music provided by a very well-known figure that is so prestigious and loved as Teresa Parodi, composer and former Minister of Culture of Argentina. We will hear another song that was also composed for the campaign of AICA to support workers in the food chain. And with that, thank you all very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of participating as well, and to be able to share these few minutes with you. I've learned so much from all of you, wonderful ideas. Thank you. Good afternoon and good day. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias a todos. Un abrazo.
Hola, soy Teresa Parodi.
Hi, I am Teresa Parodi. I wish to share a new song with you. I composed it in these times, and I want to especially dedicate it to those working with the land, our farmers, who make it possible for us to have food on the table in these very difficult times. Music is a love poem, an embrace at a distance. And that is what I feel, and that is what we need now.
Viento norte, correntada, te mira el monte, canta el agua, y en lo hondo del olvido, inclinado en las orillas, el peón que sigue arando, tierra ajena de rodillas, se levanta y suelta al viento un zapucay que no termina cuando canta en las acordeonas esa música bendita. Rojo cuarac, la tierra sin mar, reino de la luz, y en el acordeón resonga el clamor de los boyas. Rojo cuarac, la tierra sin mar, reino de la luz, y en el acordeón resonga el clamor de los boyas. Brillo, resolana, y en el río, Sicagua. Llámame, fuego en el alma, llámame, rayo de vida, sentimiento que se baila. Al dolor dale alegría, esperanza al desconsuelo, al silencio melodía, y a la gente del pueblo dale amor y rebeldía. Rojo cuarac, la tierra sin mar, reino de la luz, y en el acordeón resonga el clamor de los boyas. Rojo cuarac, la tierra sin mar, reino de la luz, y en el acordeón resonga el clamor de los boyas.